Hello and welcome to the Formidable Over 40 podcast. I'm Sarah Pittendrigh, a mum, award-winning entrepreneur, cancer survivor, mentor and coach. In series 2 of the podcast, we're sharing new stories along with the ethos that you are never too old and it's never too late to design a life you love. On this episode, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Australian broadcaster and author Sheridan Stewart. Sheridan has recently published her book, I Am Enough, which recounts a 90-day challenge to find contentment through spending less, feeling happier, and focusing on the things that matter the most. The book is an antidote to the constant pressure we are under to do more, have more, and be more. Sheridan's broadcasting career spans more than 20 years, and she has been one of Australia's favourite FM, music, radio personalities and presenters. After suffering with feelings of burnout and the demands of being pulled in so many different directions, Sheridan realised a necessity to write her book and changed her approach to life, which I'm so excited to hear more about. Before we do, please can I ask you to rate and subscribe to the Formidable Over 40 podcast so I can keep sharing more inspirational stories. So, good morning, Sheridan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you. I love your ethos.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, could you share with our listeners a little bit about yourself?
My current self is working part-time for the national broadcaster who I've been full-time with for the last 9 years. So that's the equivalent of your BBC in the UK. And of course, for us, it's the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. So from being an FM music presenter, which quite frankly is a very easy, very fun job. You talk a little bit between songs, chat with a few listeners, do a few contests and play an awful lot of music. And, I absolutely loved it. I had a blast doing that. But I always felt the urge to do what I would call meaningful content. When I had the opportunity to come to the ABC, I was so excited, Sarah. I was so excited. I've absolutely loved it. I put my hand up for everything, and that at some point became part of the problem. So I guess we'll get to that as we tick along, and the reasons why I've gone part-time for 12 months, just to pull back, to press pause and take a deep breath and have a look at perhaps doing things a little bit differently. Maybe the same job, but maybe doing it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it sounds like my ideal job, doing what you're doing with music and presenting, and I've just got into podcasting over the last sort of year, and I just love all these wonderful interviews and these people who I'm meeting. I mean, you must meet some very interesting people in your line of work, do you?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone from politicians to musicians and everything in between. And some of the most interesting conversations are with everyday people. An example, when people say, who was your all-time favourite interview? Oh, it wasn't an interview. It was actually a phone call. When I was back in FM radio, and I'd played a song, and it was a song that was from the UK. And I talked briefly, to my audience, saying, I went overseas, and one of the real highlights was taking a friend with me who'd been agoraphobic, who'd been scared of going outside and quite socially phobic. And the fact that she got to a point where she could travel, international travel, and this song, whatever it was, really captured that moment. Well, a week later, a listener called and reminded me of that and said, I just wanted to thank you because after I heard that, I thought, if Sheridan's friend can go overseas, maybe I can walk out the front door and go to the post box. Yeah, she did for the first time in 5 years. Yeah. And that is the power of what we do, Sarah, in sharing our stories. Exactly. Know who needs to hear it, whether it's on radio, in a podcast, or in a book.
And that's so important. And when you were sharing that particular story, I got that stab in my stomach because I was agoraphobic in my 20s. And I totally can resonate with what you're saying. And this is why, like you, I feel it's so important to share your stories, because what can sometimes happen is people can look at us at the end of our journey as to sort of where we are now and think, oh, I'm not enough because I'm not like them. potentially, you know, and to see women who are strong or successful, or they've done well in their career, and they can look at your destination, and that can sort of, I think that can create like sort of self-limiting beliefs in people. And that's why I want to share with them that, hold on a minute, you're looking at where I am today. I wasn't there in my 20s. In my 20s, I was agoraphobic, suffering from panic attacks every day. And, you know, but what I'm trying to do with the Formidable Over 40 podcast and through my I Can method and so forth is to share the stories and to get my guests to share their stories and our vulnerabilities, so that, like what you did there, sharing, it inspires other people to say, hang on a minute, if they can do that, I can too. Do you see where I'm coming from? And I think that it's so important to share our stories, the good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly.
Absolutely. And I would love to add to that conversation by saying, I think that in our current times with social media, we've now got everyday people trying to emulate movie stars, rock stars, people with lots and lots of money, and then present that in a snapshot, a very well-crafted, light, perfect, filtered picture. Yeah. So even our friends look like they're having a better life than we are.
God, yeah, exactly. And that is the thing that very much concerns me. And again, for the next generation, I think, again, it's important. But certainly for me, my passion and my ethos is to ensure that I share the reality of my journey as an entrepreneur and as a mum, because I don't want the next generation to just believe this laminated lifestyle that is being portrayed on social media, where you have to be perfect and you're never enough. And you'll understand that, obviously, because of the book you've just written, which we're going to talk about. And I, like you, I'm very passionate to ensure that, you know, we keep it real.
The authentic verse needs to come through. The authentic face needs to be seen. I'm pretty sure if I have a second bite at the cherry and get to write another book, it'll be about, you know, that instead of doing the age gracefully, age gratefully.
Yeah, no, that is so true. We maybe should write that book together, Sheridan, because I tell you what, I'm absolutely on the same page, pardon the pun, as you. So rolling on now to Formidable Over 40. So really, we've kind of covered why I'm doing Formidable Over 40, the podcast. It's because, well, one, I want to share authentic journeys so that people who may be listening, it may be women in midlife, it might be the next generation, I want them to understand that life isn't always, you know, plain sailing. And there are peaks and troughs, but it's often the failings, which I believe are lessons and opportunity in disguise, that shape us for the better. And we shouldn't be afraid of it. And it's those lessons, as I say, that can make us formidable. So if I asked you, what does Formidable Over 40 mean to you?
Back to turning 40 and the fear I had leading up to that, you know, some sort of, you know, ripe ending, and I don't know whether it was going to be. I wasn't where I thought I'd be. You know, I'd seen 40 all my life as some sort of goal. When I got there, I thought I'd have, you know, cleaners and a two-story house and all these, you know, all these. I did absolutely nothing to bring that about. Ironically, I hadn't focused myself in a way that would put me in a financial situation where I could afford someone else to do my house cleaning. So there was that. There was also something that I guess is a little ironic, is that I'd spent, you know, the first phase of adulthood quite overweight and terribly self-conscious about it. And when I hit 40 for the first time, and I was only like this for a red hot minute, I was the size I'd always wanted to be. I didn't stay there very long, but I was the size I always wanted to be. And I don't know what I thought would happen. Some sort of crazy magic would happen and my life would be, you know, very Hollywood. But I remember thinking, you know, the real freedom for me was just putting on a pair of jeans and walking out the door. And what really struck me was Sheridan is Sheridan at 40, at 20, you know, at whatever age I get to live to. This size, that size. It's actually all just me, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In that, life became at least a journey towards feeling formidable, feeling like, hey, this is me, like it or lump it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it's very true, isn't it? It's those decades, isn't it, that we go through, and it's like, we're the foundation of our future, aren't we? And so we're the base layer, and then we've got all these decades that are either building us up or they're holding us down, aren't they? And it's like, you've either got to think, are you being weighed down by the layers of the decades, or are the layers of the decades building you up? So going back, right the way back to when Sheridan was 15, what were your dreams and hobbies?
Absolutely horse mad, and probably just starting to get interested in sex. So that was a little distracting. Before that, it was just horses, horses, horses.
Yeah.
And growing up in a single mother household from my sort of high school years, there wasn't a lot of money to go around. And even before that, I was one of those kids that begged for a pony and never got one. But my parents did say, if you want something badly enough, you can go out there and get it. We're not doing it for you. So I was one of those kids that I would get up, they never stopped me. I got up before dawn. I walked for a couple of miles to the train station, caught a train, had to wait 20 minutes for a bus, caught the bus. So I could pick up someone else's horse poo and maybe have a chance to ride that horse somewhere during the day. So I always had that passion and drive that I could make something happen.
Let's talk about your book. So I've got a copy of it here, which it's absolutely fabulous. I have enough, I do enough, and I am enough. So this book really resonates with me, and I'm still only in chapter 1, because I've got that many things going on. But it is absolutely fabulous, and I can't wait to get stuck into it again this evening. Part 1, letting go. That's where I'm up to, and I was laughing. There's a part in it about you talk about notebooks. About starting a new. I honestly, I wish you could see in my office. I don't know how many notebooks I've got, and it's always about every time I start a new project. Oh, I need a new notebook, and I need a new pen. And it's like, and I love the way that you started picking up your other, your notebooks and started writing in them again as an example. And I have your voice inside my head now when I'm going shopping, and it's like, do you really need 25 navy blue polo neck jumpers, Sarah? I mean, is there something different about every one of those? And do you need 42 pairs of jeans that are all slim legs, 32 length, and all look the same colour? So, I do have you on my shoulder, and I am working through the process. So tell me about your book. Tell me about the purpose of it and why you wrote it.
I don't think I am a person who wrote during the pandemic. We seem to be seeing this spout of wonderful books, and journals included, where people have taken the time to actually, articulate and share out what's going on for them. So for me, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the precursor to that was what you would have all seen on your television, which was the Black Summer bushfires here in Australia. They were catastrophic. And, as a national broadcaster, we are the emergency broadcaster, the go-to people. And everything got taken over. The airwaves 24 hours a day around the nation. We were, broadcasting through these amazing conditions. And that bizarre thing where you're doing your part, but it just feels so small compared to the people who were there on the front line. And I think we're seeing a lot of burnout in my industry. And it sort of began there for me personally. I found it very hard to switch off, knowing that wildlife, by the millions, animals were being burned to death, was just something that I just couldn't sleep, and worrying about. The fires literally started in my broadcast region here in southeast Queensland. They started in winter. It's called Black Summer, but it actually started in winter. And it swept through all these places that I'd lived and worked, over the last, 2 or 3 decades. So I felt connected to all of these places. And then at the tail end of that, the last fires, still smouldering, and along comes the announcement that, we're in a global pandemic, and all they could think was, where do firefighters have to go out? And it was a pandemic, and you're not allowed to, be in the same room with other people or touch other people. It just really did my head in. But I just kept going because, it's very much that case of the show must go on. Somebody's got to do it. We must rise to the occasion. And and I kept doing that comparison thing, which is always deadly. Compared to other people, I didn't think I had it that tough. So I didn't really see the early signs. Actually, that's not true. I did, but I chose to ignore them. I kept, going down that I must keep going. And so I did. So it probably started back then, and I noticed in my journaling, because I've always, kept a journal, that I'm just obsessed with stationery. I could just buy a new notebook every day.
Too.
And every time I'm going to start a new project, it has to have this new notebook. And I've been watching the word enough in this lovely cursive. My handwriting's very messy in general, but there's something about the flow of the word. And I just kept seeing this word appear. It was like I was doodling it unconsciously. And a couple of other things happened. So I'll try and get through this quickly because there's a whole book about it. But basically, again, for the second time in my life, I'd lost this weight that I'd, felt so uncomfortable about and so self-conscious about, my whole adult life, apart from that red hot moment when I was 40. Anyway, I'd found what I thought was the solution, and I'd actually held that weight off for 4 years, and I was doing something quite restrictive and very healthy, so, no regrets. It was starting to creep back on. My husband was living and working in another state, and, along comes the pandemic, and that became harder. We were several borders apart from each other, and, we've got the poodle, so, flying around, all the flights had stopped. It was harder and harder to see each other and spend time together. Everything was very, very tenuous. And at the same time, I came into an inheritance. So I mentioned my background coming from that kind of single mother environment where the times were pretty tight through my teen years. And I was just overcome with generosity, really, and started doing all sorts of strange things with money and complaining about my weight. And my husband, and bless him, because, this could have ended very badly, he took a deep breath and put his hands on my shoulders and he said, I think you should have a look at how much you're spending in cafes and restaurants. If you're upset about your weight and you're worried about money, have a look at, how much you're eating out. And it was one of the few things we could do. I don't know what it was like. I think your lockdowns were more extreme than ours, but after the first lockdown, we could go to a cafe or you could order takeout. And, so this sort of food thing, and I'd always been a foodie anyway, was taking on larger than life proportions. We could go to a cafe, meet a friend, sit down, take our masks off for a few minutes and eat, and then put them back on. So, to my defense, that was one of but really, I've always been someone who eats in cafes and restaurants. And he said, I think you should do a sort of forensic look at your bank statements from the last 3 months. And look, storm was coming out of my ears, and I felt that really strong urge to point out all the ways he was wasting money. But instead, I took a deep breath because there was truth in it. And I thought, okay, I'm feeling defensive because, he's hit the sore spot. And I did that. And yes, I could see I was spending more than necessary in cafes and restaurants. And that had, caused me to let go of some of the good habits that had held, in a space where I felt okay about my body. I still, of course, wanted to be thinner, but that's, that's a thing. I also picked up on a few other things, Sarah. So I'm quite a driven person, and now I'm even broadcasting to everyone who's working from home and, or not working and receiving extra government support because, all of those things rolled out during those lockdown times. I was actually working more than ever, but I started doing the things that I was telling other people to do, take an online course, this, that, and the other. So I was buying flowers for friends, because you could send them interstate willy-nilly. Every charity that, rang me or emailed me or shook a tin at me, I was donating to. I just sort of was feeling sort of financially expansive until I could see it trickling away. And then I was nervous. I even bought a podcasting course for $999 that expired before I could use it. I didn't even get to do. I did ring them, and because it was put together by someone who had a broadcasting background, and I said, "Oh, look, I'm Sheridan. I work for the ABC. I've done Black Summer. I've done the pandemic. I've been too busy to do this. Can I please have an extension?" And Lillian said, "I know we don't do that, but for $99.99, you can join this, and then you can." And it's like, no, I can't keep doing this. So from there, I just began to contemplate the mantra, I have enough.
Yeah.
I do enough. I am enough. That mantra started coming up, and I thought, well, I look back 3 months. What if I look forward 3 months, 90 days, which I love because it's a season, and every season is different, and we're meant to change. And so I created a 90-day challenge based on what I was seeing in my own behaviour. And nobody has to do this the same way as me. Though some people are, are taking a leaf out of that particular idea. For me, it was no cafes and restaurants for 90 days. And that's like, not even a cup of coffee. Though I did end up with a small caveat to try and make it successful. But I didn't end up I put $5 in my wallet.
Yeah, I admit that,
The coffee, I'll have one. I think I only perhaps used it once in the 90 days. I just got used to making and taking my own. And the third part was to go home from work on time, to not do any unpaid overtime. And you can probably guess which one I failed at. So I'd written this page in my journal, which appears in the book as day one, literally without any editing. That's literally what I wrote that day with the notebooks and the, seeing my habits and deciding to do a 90-day challenge. It was just a personal journal entry. The next day, I was doing a radio program. We were through the worst of those lockdowns. Of course, COVID is still with us on the planet, but life was kind of getting back to normal, and we were allowed to have guests back in the studio. And I had a guest in. Her name is Georgia Hooper, and she writes on mindfulness. And we had a little bit of a chat on there, and I did a segment called Mindful Mondays. And it was right at the end of my show. So at the end of the show, I come off the air, take the studio off and switch it over to another studio, and I'm done and dusted. And she happened to be friends with one of my colleagues, and she said, I hear you're a writer as well. What are you writing? I talked a bit about my fiction. And then I said, but, I wrote this journal entry last night, and I think it's a book. I have a feeling it's rolling now, and that I should act soon. And so I told her about it, and she said, absolutely, you should pitch it right now, today, and pitch it to this particular publisher. And I'm like, hey, sister, I've got 1 page. I can't do a 1-page pitch. It would have made a better story if I had, of course, but I did 3 pages. I pitched to that particular publisher, and then I went and made a coffee, and then I pitched to another 2. I just sort of put it out there. 2 of them didn't take unsolicited work. All 3 of them got back wanting more. But the publisher I went with, who I believe I will never forget her email. It was like, gosh, within less than an hour that I'd actually sent this, pitch out, which was tiny. It was like, a couple of lines, a tiny bio, and these 3 single, 2.5 pages, I think it was. Yeah. And she wrote back to me and she said, Sheridan, I had a million things to do today, but when I saw the title of your book, I had to stop and read it. Can we talk more? Do you have more? And from there, I just had such a good feeling. The other 2 got back as well, but in the end, it was that initial email that just said to me, this person gets me. I want to work with this person.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I mean, that those 3 strong lines, I have enough, I do enough, and I am enough. It's incredibly powerful. And so, I mean, I know for myself, reading through it, it is so true. I mean, I was bankrupt 14 years ago, and my home was repossessed, and I had absolutely no money at all. And I lived so frugally, and yet I still survived. And yet, isn't it interesting that as certainly I can speak for myself, it's like, as I've built my businesses and had more money and done, how easy it is to get back into that pattern. But I look around my office and I must be able to see about 30 bloody notebooks and about, I can't tell you how many fountain pens, that are all the same bloody colour and all doing the same thing. And I'm thinking, what the hell? And it was reading your book that just made me realise that why do we waste so much money? Why do we need?
We're bombarded with that messaging the whole time. Of course, that's not the stuff that really counts. The books are important. Have a couple of books, but let's go out before we go buying more. Let's use what we have. And so that's where the journey began. We both even finished the 90-day challenge when I had to sit down and do a fuller pitch and really put together what the book was going to look like. Mm. And it's been described as memoir wrapped in self-help. So I wrote all of the personal stories first and the reflections, and then that kind of, got sculpted. It was like putting together a big jigsaw puzzle in the end. Yeah. And then worked it around, or it became a natural fit with the different themes and the different parts of the book, and that 90-day challenge just struck me as maybe I'm not the only one that's going to benefit from this.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the feedback, because I always think it's wonderful, isn't it? When I've been watching on Instagram where you've been popping up some testimonials from the people who've been reading your book. And it's wonderful, isn't it, when you get that feedback from someone who's actually read your book. Have you had anything that's been particular standout feedback from your readers?
The real standout, Sarah, has been that everyone is saying similar things. And that is so heartwarming because, that is my intention, is that it's something relatable. I didn't want to write an expert telling you how to do something. This is very real. It's very real. People are saying, I can't. I didn't expect that. I didn't think people would cry, but apparently some of them had. The consistent feedback has been, I felt like you wrote this for me, or I felt like you wrote this about me. Thank you for being so honest. Thank you for being so vulnerable. That lovely thing when we all get to feel connected and relatable. It's probably what I call the Oprah factor. Like we first Oprah, in Australia, some people are like, when is she crying? It's like, this woman is so authentic. To see somebody who could just be herself. She's probably had a bigger impact on, those of us like our good selves that are, perhaps 10, 15, 20 years younger. Growing up with her, or I was already growing up really, but in my 20s when she was rising and rising and rising, I saw something about that. And it was something that, just because there weren't presenters in FM music, it was very much a women-dominated industry. So much in the ABC, there's always been strong women. Out there in the commercial world of radio, I didn't actually have any role models. So I didn't necessarily sound like anybody else. And sometimes being a trailblazer, it's not too bad. And when along comes Oprah, and it was like this validation, it's like, I
think it's really important to have books like this, and to share the stories, because there's a lot of, especially in women, for women in business and women who are out there as role models, because it can be very lonely. It can be a very, very lonely space. And there's this real fear of losing the authority that you've built up over the decades by sharing vulnerability, isn't there? So sometimes people won't speak out, and therefore they're holding in a lot of angst. But when they then read, stories like books that you've put out, I've put out, podcasts like this, and it gives them that light bulb moment, I would say, of hope, so that they know that it's not just them. And I think it's really important to help people reconnect with what really matters in life, because they can get very lost. I always say you've got to remember that you're not just a someone, you're a someone too. And, and it's true, isn't it? Because we can lose our identity in being a someone's. We're always a someone's, aren't we? But at the end of the day, we are still very much a someone, and that has to be our priority.
Yes, and we must be ourselves, because I guess in authoring a book, it's also helped me with that identity shift. I still love my job. I'm, in the of some of the people I work with at the ABC, but I'm known as LBC Sheridan Stewart, and before that I was Triple M Sheridan Stewart, and I know that brand is attached to you. And in writing this book, it's just, here I am, and, hopefully it's enough.
What would you say, like, obviously you've talked about going through the decades and what you've done and what you're doing, but now, Sheridan, today, what would you say, and as a result of writing the book as well, what's driving you now? What is your why?
I think I've always, something I identified in my 20s when I've always been a bit of a self-help junkie, the Oprah factor, you probably guessed it. But looking at the why of life, and more importantly, looking at what runs me over forward, like what a sense of perhaps purposes.
Yeah.
That's always been, if I can help others see that they have choice when I'm doing my job, that's kind of what I feel like I was put on the planet to do, help others see they have choice. We don't, of course, always choose, and I'm not the first person or the last person to say this, we can't always choose everything that happens to us. We are not omnipresent. None of us chose the pandemic. We all have aspects of our life that nobody would put their hand up and go, yes, please, and you meet throughout the course of this book my dear friend Mel, who passed away just before Christmas, but she chose everything she could to be positive, to be present, and to be present for herself. It was an extraordinary thing that she allowed me into her world. And so, yes, of course, you can share whatever you like, Sheridan. If I could face half the challenges and half the incredible things she's gone through, even a fraction of that grace, then I think life would, feel pretty complete. It's extraordinary, what we can do, as in the ethos of your book as well, the I can method. And, although it's never, it's never too late, never too old, you're never too late. And until you can't, you can. And then that's it. I was like that to her very last breath, she did when she could.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, goodness me, absolutely. And the podcast now, our interviews, I could speak to you all day, Sheridan. Gosh, our podcast is sadly interview coming to an end. And on that, coming to the conclusion, what advice and if you were to pay forward and share some advice to anyone who's listening now, there might be someone sitting at a crossroads thinking, oh, God, I just don't know where to go, what to do. It happens at midlife, doesn't it? That midlife crossroads. What words of wisdom would you share to somebody who may be feeling stuck and just doesn't really know which way to turn?
I guess it's probably a bit of a modern take on the Buddhist quote, who apparently the Buddha once said, when you get to a crossroad and you don't know which way to go, sit down. And my way of saying that is press pause. It doesn't mean that you are giving up. And I think people really get confused between surrender and giving up, sacrifice. Sacrifice is just letting go of something lower in order to attain something higher. So press pause. You can always go back to that thing if it's going to work for you, but maybe you'll go back to it with a little bit of new insight. Press pause and reflect, take that time, give yourself the time to let those correct choices for now, for you, you're on right now, not who you were 20 years ago, not what your parents or society or anyone else says you should be, the choices that you want to make right now that are right for you, let them emerge because they're in there. They just need some space. You need to, press pause from all the crazy and all the great things you do. Sometimes it can be even harder for those of us that love what we do to just stop and take account and go, I love this, but maybe I've had enough. Maybe it's time to step back. And then that's time to just press pause. Just give yourself those little moments.
I mean, that's such wonderful advice, because pressing pause, as you say, just to unravel those whirring thoughts. And sometimes we're so very focused on what we think we want because of what we are being told that we need and who we should be and who we shouldn't be. And if what you're saying there, by pressing pause and just giving ourselves that time to think, and sometimes to actually unravel, it's easier to think, what do I not want? What do I not like? What do I not want to put up with anymore? And then by listing all of those things, can then clear space for what I really do want to come in, can't it?
yes, that you do have to let go and make space. Nothing new can come in, and that's where we're in danger of just retreading the same path over and over again, hoping for a different result.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Sheridan, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me and to my guests on Formidable Over 40. Before I say goodbye, can you share with the listeners where they would be able to find out more about you and where they can buy this fantastic book? I have enough, I do enough, and I am enough.
Starting to get my mojo on with Instagram. So, that's a place that I'm enjoying. There's a lot for me to learn. I have no idea really what I'm doing or how to share things. I'm making it up as I go, but I will learn and I will respond to you if you message me. Sheridan Stewart, nice and easy. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook. And it's been an absolute delight chatting to you.
So thank you ever so much. So thank you for listening to the Formidable Over 40 podcast. Thank you so much to the fabulous Sheridan for joining us and sharing her wonderful story and all about her book. Please head over to the show notes to find links to connect with Sheridan and get a copy of her book. Follow the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes, and please do share Formidable Over 40 with anyone you think will enjoy it or needs to hear it.